12 o'clock, and I am going to ask Megan to hit the record button for us so that we can get started. All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this week's Wednesday webinar, which also kicks off a whole series from now through the beginning of December. My name is Allison McWilliams, and I am so glad that so many of you have made the choice to join me today to talk about one of my favorite topics, but also, as we all know, an incredibly frustrating topic, which is goal setting. Inherently, I think we all know that goals are important, or at least that it's something that we have to do. But a lot of us struggle with writing them or don't know how to write them effectively, which then leads to failed or broken goals, which in turn leads to frustration. So it's a pretty vicious cycle. But here's the thing, and I've titled this webinar intentionally, and if you know me, you know that there's very little that I don't do intentionally. Hope is not a plan. Hope is important, dreams are important, aspirations are important. But if you have any desire to push those things forward, you need to move beyond hoping.
Can you fail to detect my speaker when it was here before?
Sorry, you need to move beyond hoping and dreaming and actually create a plan for yourself. And so this is true whether you're thinking about career goals or life or healthy habits, or, even if you just want to, let's say, increase the number of books you will read this year. There's a pretty big difference between I want to read more books and I have a goal to read 2 books per month between now and the end of the year with an associated action plan. So that's what we're here to talk about today over the next 30 minutes, namely, why does this matter? What gets in our way? What does the research say about effective goal setting? And then I'm going to walk you through the process and actually give you an opportunity to get some feedback on your goals. So before we get started, and this is pretty timely, let's do some housekeeping. You all should be muted and your videos are turned off, and that has been done intentionally again. So if you're not, we would really ask that you make sure that that is the case for yourself. If you have issues or questions as we go, please put those in the chat box, and I've asked my colleague Megan Hoyt to monitor that for us. If we have time, I will get to those questions at the end, but if not, we are recording this webinar. You will all be sent that recording in a follow-up email along with some bonus resources, and I will definitely answer any of your questions there. And before we dive into this, let me introduce our team. You see me on the left there, as well as my colleagues, Lauren and Megan. And in our roles, we support students, faculty and staff, and alumni, and lead 2 offices, the Mentoring Resource Center and the Alumni Personal and Career Development Center here at Wake Forest. You see on the screen there are 2 websites and all the ways to connect with us, which we hope you will do. One thing I would particularly like to point out is that we have a huge archive of advice pieces, videos, other webinars like this, online courses you can take, and other tools to help you, especially in your career development process. So please do take advantage of those resources. One thing we hear a lot from our alumni is how nice it would be to have a central place with tools and resources and networking opportunities. So if you leave here with nothing else, please know that it does exist and is available to you. Okay. So let's take some time to recognize the moment that we're in and how that is impacting our abilities to move forward with something that we might call goals or a plan. So first, I think it's important to note that there's both a good amount of COVID dreaming happening right now, but also a good amount of COVID shaming. And so what do I mean by that? On the one hand, I see a lot of people talking about these giant dreams that they have to start a side business or take up a new hobby or write the great American novel or learn a new language or whatever. And on the face of it, I think these types of dreams are quite healthy. We could all use a little aspiration to something bigger than ourselves and bigger than this moment. And in fact, if we don't have hope for something better or different for ourselves than what is happening right now, then we're actually choosing to live in a pretty hopeless place, and that isn't healthy. However, If you're one of these people, I would challenge you to ask yourself this question: why now? Why now and not 6 months ago? Why now and not a year from now? What is it about this moment that is providing the conditions that support your ability to make these dreams a reality? One of the important steps to the goal setting process that we're going to talk about is getting real on your challenges and your roadblocks. And quite honestly, the people I know who are pushing these goals forward right now are also the ones who are the most vocal about how exhausted they are. And that is worth thinking about. Which brings me to the idea of COVID shaming. So a couple of months ago, our friend and Wake Forest alumnus, Ryan Riccardella, led a webinar for us, which you can find on our Learn with Life After Wake platform on our website, on the topic of the myth of winning this quarantine. And I don't know about you, but I'm a little tired of seeing messages on social media and elsewhere asking what I'm doing with all the time that I now have available to me. There's been a popular post on Twitter helpfully reminding everyone that Shakespeare wrote King Lear during a plague, as if you might do the same. Quite frankly, I've never worked as hard or as many hours as I have these past 5 months, and I'm not trying to homeschool children. So I think we would all benefit from not expecting people to be the most right now and give each other and certainly ourselves a little grace. So second point about this moment, it's the start of fall. And even if you're not in school or in any way connected with education like we are, there's still something about the start of fall that encourages people to think about their career plans and what's next and getting their acts together. It's like we went to school for so long that the fall just signals the start of something. Also, in the spirit of keeping your goals short-term and manageable, which we're going to talk about, thinking in terms of the fall semester or now till winter break, or however you want to frame it, is actually a handy method to put to use. Third, as I mentioned earlier, I think we all sort of just know that goal setting is a good thing to do. Or at the very least, we recognize that it's something that we are required to do by our jobs. I've never really heard anyone say, goal setting, what a terrible, tragic idea. And honestly, whatever reason got you here today, you at least on some level buy into the idea of setting goals. My team produces at a very high volume. And part of that is because we work really hard. But part of it is that we set goals at least twice a year, sometimes quarterly, with specific action items and accountability measures. And at every team meeting, we use those goals as progress checks to see where we are and what needs to happen next and to keep moving forward. And it's a big part of our ability to be successful. And then finally, just to bookend our COVID dreaming, I'd say a whole bunch of us are also kind of weighed down by a bit of COVID procrastinating for the exact same reasons. The world is turbulent and overwhelming and uncertain right now. And while that can sometimes be a prompt to seek out control and routine, it also can just make us want to go get in bed and pull the covers over our heads and not face reality. So let's acknowledge that's a super normal reaction, and I think pretty okay for a time. But if you find yourself living in that space, then it's time to make some changes. If it's just procrastinating, then fine. Let's talk about some strategies to move past that. But when procrastination becomes depression, then I want to encourage you to seek out the help that you need. As a former employer of mine used to say, we all need a checkup from the neck up now and again, and there's no shame in that game. Okay, so we're all here for different reasons. Maybe one of the ones I just mentioned, maybe something else entirely. And let's take a moment to get real. Goal setting is hard. Even if we're one of the ones who can say, I know this matters, I know it's good to do, it's still hard. And there's several reasons for this. First, it's very easy to fall into traps of the imposter syndrome and disaster fantasizing. So the imposter syndrome is that voice that says, who am I to think about a career change? Or who am I to start that side project? We talk ourselves out of the dream before we even set any goals. And when we fall into the disaster fantasy trap, we start to imagine all of the what ifs. So what if I get that new job and I'm terrible at it? Or what if I start that side project and I can't handle the demand? So when we fall into one of these traps, what we're doing essentially is giving ourselves an out. If I never try, I never have to fail. And that is a terrible, tragic thing. Second, setting goals is hard because we lack motivation due to false expectations. So think about the last time that you set a New Year's resolution for yourself. Statistically, most New Year's resolutions fail by early February. Why? Because we make them too big, too unrealistic, and set ourselves up for failure from the outset. So we go from, I've never run a step in my life, to I'm going to train for a marathon. And then a few weeks in, we realize that running in the cold and the dark is hard, and we don't have the right shoes, and we can't run more than a few minutes without stopping to walk. And what happens? We quit. And then third, we have too many priorities on our list right now. We have jobs that are demanding a lot of us, and lives that are demanding a lot of us, and a giant global health crisis that is impacting us but out of our control, and on and on. It's a lot even to remember your grocery list. So this is what's known as cognitive overload. When there are too many competing priorities, it's hard to focus and be planful on any one of them. All right, so those are some of the reasons why it's hard. And that being the case, then why do we set goals at all? So you may have heard that old saying that what gets measured gets managed, or what gets measured gets done, which has led to things like KPIs, or key performance indicators, OKRs, or objectives and key results, and a ton of other systems and processes and cute acronyms for managing work. But of course, what these don't account for are the things that matter that can't be measured, or that you are a human being and not a widget coming off the factory line. So it's easier then to think about it this way. Goals turn our hopes and dreams into actionable plans that we can bring to life. My team talks a lot about goals as part of the mentoring process. And in that language, goals are always about personal learning and growth, and getting from some identified current reality to some desired future state. Goals should invigorate you, and they should get you excited to do the work. Otherwise, absolutely, what's the point? So I love this quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. It takes as much energy to wish as it does to plan. How true is that? We set goals because they help us to move forward and to get to where we want to be. If you're going to spend time hoping and wishing for something to happen, why not spend that time actually creating a plan to make it happen? And goals help us with all the things we just talked about. So, imposter syndrome and disaster fantasy traps. Setting goals, when you set them the right way, provide accountability and a clear, focused path forward so that you can see beyond the what ifs. They help you go from some vague idea in the future to confidence in your ability to make it a reality. They help you go from, in a dream world, I would run my own boutique PR firm one day, to creating a plan to make a move into a role that grows your experience and knowledge of the PR industry and helps you move one step closer to making that dream a reality. Lack of motivation and false expectations. When you set goals the right way, it actually gives you energy and a reality check. Goals that are set the right way don't set you up to fail because they take into account what's realistic and what challenges you might face. And there's actual research out there that demonstrates that the act of setting ambitious goals, not unrealistic ones, but ambitious ones, actually changes your brain and makes you more motivated to achieve them. It strengthens your problem-solving skills and leads to higher performance than on goals that pose no challenge at all. And then third, a Wake Forest professor by the name of E.J. Matsicampo has done some really cool research into how setting short-term goals actually helps reduce cognitive overload. So sometimes that means setting a goal or creating a plan just for today or just for this week. But by doing so and by writing the plan down, you're getting some things out of your headspace and allowing yourself then to focus on the other things that are there. So great. And you're probably thinking, still hard. Why? Because no one teaches this stuff. I personally think that the hardest part of goal setting is the actual process of writing goals the right way. When you don't, your goals are too big or too vague or too unrealistic, or a host of other things that don't allow you to see that path forward that will give you the confidence that you need to say, hey, I can do this. So I once heard someone say that all time management or productivity courses are taught by people who are strong J's on the Myers-Briggs and attended by people who are strong P's. So if you don't know what that means, a J is someone who loves structure and organization and goals and a to-do list, whereas a P is someone who likes flexibility and options and spontaneity. So no matter how you might feel about the Myers-Briggs, I'd say there's some truth to what that person said. Those of us who love a to-do list try to teach people who don't how to use them, and that can be a fool's errand. So I say all that to let you know that you don't have to get bogged down in the process that I'm about to offer you. What matters most is a process that works for you. So if the idea of goal setting seems too rigid for you, think instead of setting some intentions or making some commitments to yourself. Ask yourself, what will I commit to doing for myself over the next 3 months? And you might find that that shift lowers the stress of this a bit. Okay, so let's talk about the process then. And you'll see it's not complex, it just takes work. I love this quote by Jerry Brown, the former governor of California. The reason that everybody likes planning is that nobody has to do anything. Now, there's probably some truth to that in government, but here's the thing. For you personally, you want to set goals that create the opportunity to do something. You want to set goals that get you fired up about making them happen. And here's where you start. Goal setting is always an active process of reflecting on where you've been and then projecting forward to where you want to be. And it can be easy to skip over this part, but it's actually super important. So spend some time thinking about what you've learned about yourself. What is the why behind the goals or intentions that you want to set? For example, if you're looking to change careers or start a side business, what experiences have led you to that moment and why? If you don't know the why behind your goals, you're going to lose motivation pretty quickly. And this is actually the place where it's okay to do a little dreaming and you can think long term. But ultimately, what I would like for you to be able to articulate is where you want to be in 6 months to a year. That might be part of a bigger vision, but again, don't set yourself up for failure. For instance, if you have a long-term vision that is you running your own boutique PR agency, that's fine. But unless your next step is to draw up incorporation papers, then in the next year, think instead about the move that you can make that gets you closer to that long-term vision. So it might be working towards greater responsibility in your current role or seeking out a role that builds on your strengths and experiences. All right, the next step, and I've mentioned this several times, so it should not surprise you, is to identify challenges, obstacles, and gaps that you might need to fill. So do you have the experience that you need to make that career change? Will it require a location change, and are you willing to do that? Do you have the resources that you need in terms of money, people, skills, abilities, and so on? So just write out a bulleted list, get everything out of your head and on paper. And then some of these things can either inform or be part of the goals that you set. So you may have a goal that is around building your network or acquiring the experiences or skill sets that you need to make a move. If you're working towards a more personal goal, like creating a dedicated fitness routine, then you may need to get real with yourself about the time and commitment challenges that have been standing in your way up until now. All right, so now it's actual goal setting time. And we love a SMART goal model. And some of you are groaning right now because SMART goals are the worst. And they are, but they work. And because they force you to get specific and focused on what exactly you're going to do, which is the most important part of the whole goal writing process and where most people screw it up. So what are SMART goals? They are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. They're specific. They're short and action-oriented, and they start with an action verb. So don't start your goal statements with the words be or have. Think instead of create, build, explore, research, connect, and so on. So what is the specific action that you will be taking? They're measurable, ideally with an actual number, but if not, at least so you can know what success will look like. So how will you know when you have achieved the goal? They're achievable. So think about those challenges. Do you have the resources and the opportunity to achieve the goal? Are you setting it too big or too far out in the future and setting yourself up for failure? They're realistic. Are you actually going to do this? What kind of commitment are you making to yourself? Or is this actually a goal for someone else to do for you? And then finally, they're time bound. So this is your accountability measure. At what point do you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, did I do it or not? If you look at your goal statement and it's unclear what you're going to do, then keep working on it. This isn't the place for uncertainty or ambiguity. So let's look at some examples. And first, we're going to take a look at some not great goal statements. Develop my communication skills and become a better speaker. All right, what's wrong with this? Yes, it starts with an action verb, but it's not specific. It's not measurable, and it's not time bound. Always ask yourself, what specifically am I going to do? What does it mean to develop your communication skills? What does a better speaker look like? Get promoted by the end of the year. So this is an example of a goal that someone else has to do for you. Are there steps that you could take that would lead to promotion? Certainly. And those could be great goal statements. But worded this way, this goal is very passive and needs to be about what you are going to do. Reach 1 million new clients in the next 6 months. So this one, of course, depends on your situation, but I would assume for most of us that this is neither achievable nor realistic, and you're setting yourself up for failure. All right, so let's look at some well-written goal statements. Develop a robust network of at least 20 new connections at PR agencies in New York City to learn more about the industry and potential job opportunities by the end of the year. This is a great goal statement. It's specific, it's action-oriented, it's measurable, 20 new connections. It's achievable and realistic while still forcing you to stretch a bit. And it has a time on it by the end of the year. So now you can create a plan to achieve this goal. Finish a rough draft of a novel in the next 6 months. So this is an example of a goal that doesn't have a quantifiable measure of success, but still is a pretty strong goal statement. The measure is, at the end of 6 months, do you have a finished rough draft or not? Learn basic conversational Spanish by the end of the year. So this one, you could add potentially a quantifiable measure if, for example, you were taking a class that had an assessment of your abilities. But it's still a pretty strong goal statement. Again, critically important here is to keep your goals to no more than 6 months to a year. Even shorter is great. Give yourself the chance to celebrate your successes, and then you can set some new goals. Also, I recommend never having more than 3 or 4 goals. Again, remember that cognitive overload piece. You're not going to do everything in the next 6 months. So this is a great way for you to identify your priorities as well. So once you have a goal statement, then you need to create your action steps. And ideally here, you will use your SMART language as well and order your action steps by date. So this is your to-do list where you get to check things off one at a time until you achieve your goal. So again, here are just a few examples using this goal statement again. Build a spreadsheet to track networking conversations by the end of the week. Reach out to 4 to 5 people per week on LinkedIn and through referrals from networking contacts. Follow up with new contacts after submitting job applications at contacts' respective companies each month. Here's the thing. There's no magic goal statement or action step. It needs to be what works for you, and that includes the process. So I will always hold you to a SMART goal process because I know it works. And again, I know not everyone's heads are wired the same way. So I give you permission to figure out a process that works for you. But I do want you to know that creating accountability checks for yourself matters. So number 1, it's not enough just to think about a goal. You need to write it down. Research shows that you are more likely to accomplish your goals when you put them on paper. And going back to that cognitive overload piece, when you write them down, it gets them out of your brain and leaves room for you to focus on other things. And then second, find an accountability partner. Find someone you can share the goals with. There's some mixed messages on whether this is important or not. Some research says it makes you more likely to achieve your goals, while others says it actually makes you less motivated. Personally, I fall into the first camp. I think accountability partners are a good thing. And if nothing else, it's good to have someone give you a reality check on where you're headed. So, as a participant in this webinar, we are offering the opportunity for some feedback on those goal statements. They can be personal, they can be professional, it doesn't matter. Just spend some time working on them and then email them to us at the address that you see here. Mention this webinar and we will review them and then send you feedback. Again, sometimes the best way to get clarity on your goals is to have someone else look at them and ask, does this make sense to you? We are also offering a brand new job seeker accountability group. Unfortunately, this is just for Wake Forest alumni. So sorry for the other ones who are on this webinar. But if you are a Wake Forest alum and this sounds interesting to you, it's going to meet monthly from September to December. And again, be an accountability group to work on those goals together. Registration for this closes September 10th. And we will include all of this information in the follow-up email that you will get as well, so you will know exactly where to go. So I want to end with one of my favorite quotes from John Maxwell's book, Mentoring 101. As I mentioned, and if you ever attend one of our mentoring workshops or courses, you will know that we put a strong emphasis on goals as part of the mentoring process. I love this quote and what it says about what goals do for us. The greatest achievers in life are people who set goals for themselves and then work hard to reach them. What they get by reaching the goals is not nearly as important as what they become by reaching them. It can be so easy to get focused on the process and the outcome, but try to stay focused on the path and the journey. It's so much more important and rewarding, and that's where our hopes and dreams come alive. So, once you've set some goals, let me encourage you to join us for our next webinar on brushing up that professional resume, which will also include another feedback opportunity. That's in 2 weeks, and you can see the registration information here. Also, all of our webinars, both the upcoming ones and the ones that we've already recorded, live on our Learn with Life After Wake platform. And before I wrap up, let me just check and see if we have any questions. Looks like any age limitation to set goals for a career? No, I can't imagine that. I think some of that depends on how you define the word career, right? I think there's a lot of ways to define that, but I think again, it's always important to be realistic about the goals that you are setting for yourself. Do I have the experience? Do I have the skill sets? Do I have what I need in order to be successful in accomplishing whatever this is? That would be the type of limitation that I would put on any sort of goal setting that I was doing. But I don't think age should ever be a limitation that you put in there. And the caveat to this, and this is the second part of this comment, is assuming that age is not a concern as far as the job goes, which obviously could also be a limitation. Goals have hierarchy. Some are more immediate than others. How do you know which to prioritize in your goal setting to achieve the bigger goal? Great question. So first of all, I think somewhat the answer to your question is in the question. So I always think of it in terms of a to-do list, right? And so what is most immediate? What needs to be done first? And then once you accomplish that, what needs to be done second? What needs to be done third? And also, I think, sort of using that journalism term, don't bury the lead. So when you think of it in terms of priorities, you always want to think of the goals that you set first as being the most important ones. So if I get nothing else done, I'm going to do this, and possibly the things at the bottom would drop off. But it's hard, right? Like you have to think through, and this is where sometimes, asking for other people's reflection and assessment of what you're doing, can really help to get that objective sense of, am I working on the right things, right? Like these are the things that I think I should be doing to accomplish this goal. But sometimes someone else can look at that and say, yeah, I don't think that's going to end up where you think it is. So sometimes that can be helpful as well. Great questions. Thanks for asking. So as always, we wrap asking you to connect with us in all the ways that we have available. Join our e-newsletter, connect with us on Twitter and Instagram, and look for this recording both on the website and in your inboxes once we get that wrapped up. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thanks for joining us.